Good morning, everyone. I'm Kabu Pingali. I'm a professor of applied economics and the director of the Tata-Cornell Institute. It gives me great pleasure today to welcome Ram Kaundinya, a very distinguished expert in management, especially in the managing the business of agriculture. Ram has had a very distinguished career over the last 45 years. That's a long career. Started off with a degree in management from the very famous Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. And since then, he's been on this career in agribusiness and life science companies. Spent over 2 decades with the crop protection groups, crop protection industry, and then another 2 decades in the seed industry. And with companies such as Emergent Genetics, which was started with a good friend of mine, Sam Dryden, and Ram helped set up the India operations. Then he moved on to Advanta and was the CEO of Advanta as his last major job. And since then, he's been consulting, he's been setting up companies, he's been incubating startups, and also doing a lot of private philanthropy work. I'm sure he'll mention some of that. If we have to think about the seed industry in India, Ram's the person to go to. He's been advising the Federation of the Seed Industry in India and knows a lot about this area. And among his other achievements, he wrote a book with my brother. So on the input markets in India. So there's a personal connection there. So Ram, with that, please welcome you and look forward to your presentation. I know there's about 35 people online. There could be more coming, and there'll be more people drifting in here as classes finish.
Over. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And I thank TCA for giving me this opportunity today. It is really very matter of great honor for me to be standing here and then talking about India. And before I proceed further, I just want to remember Mr. Ratan Tata, who is an illustrious son of India and a distinguished alumnus of Cornell, industrialist, philanthropist, and a humanist above all. His generosity and foresight led to establishment of TCA, and because of TCA, I'm here today standing and talking. So I'm very thankful to him for what he did, and remembering with a lot of respect and regard. So let's proceed further. I would like to, the subject is on the role of biotechnology in Indian agriculture's food and climate security. It's I will start with a little bit of overview of India and Indian agriculture. So we have actually, so India is a very large country, as you all know, and about 1.4 billion people and 140 million hectares of cultivated land. It's a very diverse country, and it has many aspects, like it's the fastest growing economy today, one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Agriculture is still a very important part of this economy. More than 50% of the people are still employed in agriculture. It's a significant player in international trade, but more importantly, food and agriculture. Annual food subsidy we operate of almost $18 billion, which is to take care of the people below the poverty line. There is a minimum support price for 23 crops, which the government offers to support the farmers. And there is a large procurement of food grains that the government undertakes for public distribution system. So it's a very complex country in which there are people who are rich and there are people who are very poor, and there are many people who are in between the two. So it's a bit of a complexity there. But if you come to agriculture, historically, Indian agriculture got benefited by the Green Revolution, and which led to high yielding varieties and substantial increase in food grain production and self-sufficiency eventually in food grain production. Today we produce more than 300 million tons of, or 330 million tons of food grains. Also, we produce more than 350 million tons of fruits and vegetables. So our horticultural crops also have made a huge progress. We grow many cash crops, and our dairy industry is very prominent. We are the largest producer of milk in the world. We have the largest herd size in the world. But it's a small land holding country. Smallholder farmers are dominant in this. 87% of our farmers are smallholder farmers. And we have around 55% of our acreage is covered by irrigation. So it's a very large irrigation base for the country, but still 45% of the area is rainfed. If you look at our crops, our yields are quite on the lower side in many crops compared to the world's best and also compared to the global averages. Some of the reasons for this are that biotic and abiotic stresses, inadequate use of modern science and technology in many of the areas is another reason. Access to modern inputs like seeds and good quality agrochemicals, whether it is fertilizers or pesticides, crop protection chemicals, is an issue in some of the parts of the country because it's a very large country. So some of the areas where distribution strength is not there, it happens. Economic practices still are quite old in many areas. Very traditional economic practices which do not always result in the highest yields. So that is also one of the reasons for lack of efficiency in water use particularly is an area of concern here. Soil degradation has been happening. This is an area of concern for all the people due to overuse of chemical fertilizers. But it is still very successful agriculture, I must say, that we have been able to feed our population, which is the greatest achievement, I would call it, that we have not been having any issue in terms of adequate availability of food. There is a need now to move from just the quantity of food to quality of food and nutrition, enhancement of nutritional standards in the country. So what are the major things that are happening in Indian agriculture? If you look at the mega trends that are taking place, in which direction, if we look at the next decade, in which direction Indian agriculture will move? So first point is that there is a shift towards the correcting the crop portfolio towards the consumer, the changes in the consumer food basket that is happening. There's a reduction in the consumption of cereals. There is a greater demand for meat, milk, vegetables and fruits, millets, etc. So there is a change in the demand pattern. We have moved from a shortage situation when whatever we produced was taken by the market, but now we are in a surplus situation. That means whatever the market needs, we have to produce. So this is a big shift that is taking place in terms of the crop portfolio. Natural resources have suffered in the last 20-30 years because of the emphasis on increasing productivity. And this had its reasons that we had to feed the population, but also the collateral damage in terms of natural resource depletion has happened. So right now the focus is on conserving natural resources, whether it is water or soil fertility or replacing flood irrigation with micro irrigation. This is a big area of emphasis for the country. Flood irrigation has been used traditionally for all the decades, and that has to be replaced. Climate change is on us, and it is no longer we don't talk of climate change in future tense anymore. It is already in the present tense, and it is quite tense actually for many of the farmers because it leads to situations that where they have to adapt to climate change with resilient inputs and practices. Sustainability of agriculture and traceability of food that is produced is gaining importance because consumers are giving more importance to traceability of food and the sustainable method of cultivation. The most important thing is that the farmers are not making money. Most of the farmers don't make money. This is an area of concern for everyone. And one of the reasons identified is that out of the consumer price, the farmer gets less than 30%. And there is a study released by our central bank only last week, which studied the markets of vegetables and fruits. And they came also with this conclusion that less than 30% of the consumer price is going to the farmer. So one of the ways to improve farmers' profitability is also to improve his share in the consumer price. And the government also is working on this to increase it to above 50%. Another area to improve his profitability is on the labor cost. Labor cost is going up because of shortage of labor. And currently, if you see the data released by the government, more than 40 to 55%, in the range of 40 to 55% of the cost of cultivation is on labor. And this depends on the crop and the geography, but broadly speaking, this is where it stands. And this is an area of concern because if you want to increase the profitability of the farmer, you have to attack the highest cost element in his cost of production, which is labor. So that's an area where there's a lot of attention nowadays. Bargaining power of farmers has to increase because these are smallholder farmers, as I mentioned. So they are coming together to form FPOs, farmer producer organizations, as a part of the collectivization effort. The policy thrust of the government to improve the global competitiveness of the farmer, because now we are global markets, we operate in global markets. If you can't compete with the global farmers in the markets, then even your domestic ability to sell in domestic markets also suffers. So that is an area of attention now. Value chain development is also taking a lot of effort from the government side. They have identified certain value chains like shrimp, meat, fruits, chilies, rice, wheat, edible oils. There is a large report produced on this, where they have identified 22 value chains on which government is laying emphasis for both domestic and export purposes. Mechanization is the next big thing that will happen because it will address the issue of labor shortage and labor cost. So mechanization is also a precursor for digitization. So there is a huge effort going on towards mechanization and digitization of agricultural, the entire agricultural value chain. And it will actually lead to more what is called precision agriculture in future. Biotechnology and its applications, both GM and non-GM, will play an important role in addressing some of the challenges about which I will talk later. Mechanization currently is addressing certain things like delivery of inputs. The drones are being used today for spraying of crop protection chemicals or for crop surveys or pest surveillance, data analysis and things like that. Uberization of farm machinery, because smallholder farmers cannot buy machines. So there is an Uberization process that is going on through what are called as custom service centers in the villages. And that actually helps the farmers to use the machines like you use a Uber taxi. And irrigation as a service is also part of a new business model that has come up. On output side, harvesting has always been mechanized in some of the crops like rice and wheat, and it is now going to other crops like cotton, picking, and harvesting of fruits and things like that. On the right side, we have the enablers. So this mechanization on the left side needs enablers on the right side, which is through digitization. So there is something called AgriStack, which the government is putting together, which will eventually digitize all the farm records. At the farm level, all the records will get digitized over a period of time. Each farmer and each farm will get a digital identity, and then the data will be captured from the farm right through the supply chain. And this will actually bring greater focus on using data more efficiently to improve farmers a lot. There is also National Agricultural Market, which is created on the digital platform, which needs more scale up and more improvements. But yes, a start has been made. Big data and analytics are taking place. Digital general crop estimation surveys are happening, and the use of analytics is increasing. So the direction in which you can see is what the country is moving. Some of the important inputs, there are 5 important inputs that are used in agriculture. On the left side, we have seeds and biological inputs, which are the non-chemical inputs. On the right side, we have crop protection chemicals and fertilizers, which are the chemical inputs. As you can see, the balance is highly tilted towards the crop the chemical inputs on the right side, $4 billion of crop production market and $40 billion of chemical fertilizer market. Out of $40 billion, around $25 billion is the subsidy provided by the government. So the farmer pays $15 billion. So it's a huge, I should say, mismatch or balance in the between left and right. Farm machinery is about $15 billion today, and it is driving. I mean, the growth is being driven. Currently, it is all based on tractorization, but more farm machinery is coming into play slowly. So this is the background, or let's say this is the base on which we are talking of the future. When we look at the future, there are 6 challenges. There are many challenges, but I have identified top 6 challenges which I would like to highlight today. And these challenges will actually be, it is necessary for us to address these 6 challenges to actually modernize Indian agriculture, to make it more productive. As we saw earlier, that the yields have to go up, the quality of produce has to improve, use of natural resources has to come down. We have to measure productivity not only per acre of land, but also per liter of water and various other natural resources. So I think in this shift, what are the great challenges I would like to talk about? Number 1 is natural resources, water and soil, organic matter. So 60% of water resources are used for agriculture today and mostly consumed by paddy, wheat and sugarcane. I'll show some numbers on that. Soil organic matter is getting depleted very rapidly, and this is due to high use of chemical fertilizers and also some economic practices. 90% of our rice today we cultivate with transplanted rice, and transplanted rice consumes much more water, as you know. And to produce every kilo of rice, we consume anything between 4,000 to 5,000 liters of water, and we export a lot of rice, right? So it's actually a bit of a anomaly in the situation that we are consuming a lot of water to produce rice and we are exporting a lot of rice. So this is something which needs to be reversed by moving the economic practice from transplanted rice to direct seeded rice. And that is the effort right now going on. Secondly, we till our soil quite a lot. And so the zero till or minimum tillage type of economic practices need to be brought in to improve the soil structures and or to protect the soil structures. So similar economic practices, soil testing was not very commonly used before deciding on nutrition for the soil. And that is also an area which is being attended to in the recent past. Hopefully that should scale up much more in the future. Climate change, as you know, is a big area, and climate change will actually is leading to a lot of fluctuations in weather. We have high temperature, we have more rains, we have more droughts than what is necessary or what was happening earlier. Cropping cycles are moving, they're shifting, and new pests and diseases and distress for the farmer. As you all know, that farmer easily gets into a distress situation if one crop is lost, because he just doesn't have any financial wherewithal to withstand even loss of even a single season crop. So that's where actually the situation is. On the waterfront, as you can see in the map, a lot of India is red in color in terms of the water stress. So this is actually extremely high water stress situation. More importantly, if you see the next slide, in which there is a plotting done, there is a special group formed by the government, water resources group. So they have estimated that the 2030 demand for water across the country, and they have estimated what are the shortfalls. You see that most of the country is in the group of 20 to 80% severe shortfall of water required by 2030. So we can foresee that water will become even more important than what it is today. And this is where we need to actually address the issue. And on the right side, you can see that it is rice and wheat, which consume more than 50% of the water. Almost 55% of the water is consumed by 2 crops, rice and wheat. That means we have to attack those crops which are consuming, and that is followed by sugarcane. So these three, if we are able to conserve water, that will have a huge impact on the overall situation. What is the second challenge? Shortfall in availability of edible oil and pulses. As I said, we have done very well on food grains, but our requirement of edible oils and pulses, we are not able to meet today. We import more than $20 billion worth of edible oils every year. And this has a huge impact on our budgets. As I said earlier, $25 billion worth of fertilizer subsidy and about $18 billion worth of food subsidy and $20 billion worth of edible oil import. These are the three big ticket items which affect our budgets at the national level. So this is an area which needs to be addressed. So Government of India has just announced last week formation of an oilseed mission with certain objectives which are listed here. So currently we are producing 12.5 million tons of edible oils, but we import 16.5 million tons because our consumption is around 29 million tons. This is estimated to go up to 35 million tons by 2030. And government's plan is that we should produce 25 million tons locally and restrict imports to only 9 million tons. So that means we have to double our production of oilseed crops in the next 6 years, which is no mean task. If you look at the track record in the last 5 years of history, our yield, our production of edible oil has gone up by hardly 5-6% per year. So whether we can reach this, and if yes, how to reach that is a big question mark. And as you can see, biotic and abiotic stresses are the major reason for the low yields in edible oil crops as well as in pulses. So we need to also look at pulses, lentil, chickpea, and others, which is a major source of protein for most of the population in the country. We are currently importing 4.7 million tons, but there is a projection that by 2030, the demand will go up to 40 million tons and our imports will have to be doubled. So I think there is a serious problem on edible oils and pulses. As I mentioned earlier, we consume a lot of water to produce rice and export it. And the crops which don't need much water, like edible oils and pulses, we import them. So I think it's actually not a healthy situation. We should be doing exactly the opposite, but we are doing this way. So that's how it is currently. Challenge number 3 is the crisis in cotton. Cotton is a big major crop, 12 million hectares. We cultivate cotton in 12 million hectares. It's a major cash crop and it has undergone a transformation. As you can see here, the transformation of cotton happened since 2002 when BT cotton came in. The yields got doubled within a period of 7 to 8 years. And you can see that yields went up from around 275 kilos per hectare. This is the yield in terms of lint. And it went up to 550 kilos per hectare by 2013. So within a period of 10 years, we doubled the yields. But the issue is that in the last 5 years, we are seeing a stagnation in this. Yields have stagnated and our production has stagnated while demand is going up. Our production, which touched between 32 to 34 million bales, has got stuck there. We were at about 13 million bales before BT cotton came, our annual production, and it went up to 36, 37 million bales. But currently we are at between 32 and 34. So then that needs to go up because the textile industry needs 45 million bales of cotton by 2030. So how do we meet that? Quality of cotton needs to be improved. And if we don't improve cotton production, we were once upon a time, means a very few years back, one of the largest or the second largest exporter of cotton in the world. But we are already moving towards becoming an importer of cotton. So there is a serious issue here. There are new pests. Pink bollworm, which developed resistance to BT cotton, is a big issue today, how to control it, and it is affecting yields in a big way. There are new diseases coming up. So cotton is an area of concern for all of us, and that's a big challenge which needs to be addressed. Weeds. There is a study which was done by Dr. Yudraj and Dr. Sadananda, which was released only 2 weeks back, and it shows the yield losses due to weeds. And as I have highlighted some of them, rice 21% of the yield loss, maize 25%, soybean 31%, cotton 20%, mustard 21%. So these are all very big crops in terms of acreages and production volumes. And you can see that there is a huge loss taking place in these crops because of weeds. So how do we overcome this problem? Weed management is a big issue. India is one of the fastest growing markets for herbicides. Chemical weed management is taking a much bigger pie now out of farmers' expenditure. And herbicide, chemical control of weeds is really taking place. But we still have to look at other methods on how to effectively control weeds in some of these. Number 5 is impending shortage of corn. Corn is a crop which we grow, but as I said earlier, our yields are only about 3 tons per hectare compared to global average of 6 tons. We haven't had any technological interventions in corn after the single cross hybrids came around 25 years back. After that, we haven't had any major technological intervention in corn. So our yields have stagnated. Our production is stuck around 30 million tons every year, and our demand is growing. Poultry and animal feed industry projects that they need 30 million tons by 2030, and that is equal to current production. And government is now promoting corn in production of bioethanol, so that will consume or that will demand another 30 million tons. So we are looking at a situation that by 2030, we may need 60 to more than 60, almost 75 million tons of corn we will need from today's 30 million tons. So how will it come? Will it come by controlling our weeds better? Insect related losses are also high. So how are we going to do this? This is an area which needs to be addressed. Challenge number 6 is that some of the local and marginal crops which need attention. These are all OP crops, as you know, hybrids and OPs. So most of them are OP crops where the private industry doesn't take too much interest because commercially they may not make a lot of sense for them. A lot of research in these crops is done by the public research institutions, but that's not adequate. There has to be interest from private sector into this. So how do we do this? And these are all very important crops for local communities because they actually provide both food and nutrition security to some of the local communities. So how do we incentivize investments into this area? And we need to develop commercial seed systems to be strengthened in these crops and in these geographies. PPP model is the only way forward. There has to be a role for private sector in this, and both must work together, but there has to be a model in which return on investment takes place. So that is actually the challenge number 6. Like I said, there are many challenges, but I have just highlighted 6 of them. So how do we do this? So there is no single solution. There has to be an architecture of technologies which will actually address this. I can't say that one single technology is a silver bullet for all this. You know, you have to have multiple ways of addressing this. There are 4 quadrangles here, which I have highlighted. One is reorienting input technologies, whether it is seed, biotechnology based, GM, non-GM, traditional breeding, all the things have to be strengthened. But also we need safer chemicals in crop protection. We need what are called non-bulk fertilizers, which are not applied to the soil. We have to minimize soil application of fertilizers and reduce soil application. Biological inputs have to be given a big boost, and both in CP and crop nutrition. We need nutrition fortified crops. Prime Minister released recently 17 varieties of nutrition enhanced fortified crops varieties. So that is another area, and micro irrigation has to replace flood in a big way. So that is on the left side. On the right side, we have the new age agri-techs, food techs, and fintechs which are coming up, which will actually play a bigger role in future in bridging some of the gaps that have existed traditionally either in terms of improving the efficiencies or improving timelines or delivering certain things to the farmer, which could not be delivered earlier. So they will increase convenience and connect farmers to markets. That is another area. Number 3 is infrastructure and policy. I'll come to that last. Actually, number 3 should be farm mechanization and precision. There has to be a greater emphasis on market mechanization. It will reduce not only labor costs, but also it will improve efficiency and precision in agriculture. And new economic practices like DSR, for example, needs machines. New economic practice like HDPS, cotton, or other crops will need mechanization. Without that, it will be impossible to achieve those levels. So finally, the infrastructure is needed, whether it is physical infrastructure or digital infrastructure, and policy support. I will talk about them in the rest of the. So I'll just talk about seed and biotech. Traditionally, we have been using biotechnology in the country. Number 1 is molecular marker assisted breeding, which has been going on for a long time now, for many decades. This has been used for developing disease tolerant varieties in rice, wheat, vegetables, and many other crops. It's used by both public and private research bodies, and it will continue to be a very important source. Traditional breeding, molecular marker based breeding, will continue to be the major thrust areas for future. There are certain areas which these things cannot meet, and those are the areas where we need to use some of the modern technologies. So currently non-GM herbicide tolerant trait has been developed, and this is released in rice, ALS technology based HT crops using imidazolone tolerance. It has been released by the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, IARI, in basmati rice. Rice Tech has released it in HT rice hybrids. BASF is developing it in rice. So there are many people who are working on developing a non-GM, because it is very unlikely that rice will ever become GM in the country. So there are efforts to develop non-GM options on herbicide tolerance. Then IMI-tolerant HT mustard is also under development, and this will also come in next 2-3 years' time. Gene editing guidelines were approved in 2022. This will actually assume good importance in future. SDN1 and SDN2, these regulations are very similar to what you have in the US. So SDN1 and SDN2 are not regulated, but SDN3 is regulated just like GM crops. And so that's how the regulations are there. Licensing and intellectual property are issues in this. There are a lot of research licenses which have been issued. So a lot of research has happened in this. Many crops and varieties have been developed in rice, wheat, and vegetables, particularly breeding for disease tolerance and nutrition fortification through molecular markers and gene editing has happened. There are many varieties which are ready for release, but they're all waiting for a commercial license and sorting out of intellectual property matters before this can hit the market. So that's the situation of gene editing today. It has a very important role to play, especially because we want to improve nutritional security of the country, and gene editing can actually help in that process. Genetic modification, the famous one, GM, is already there as an option, always there as an option. Regulatory guidelines are there in place since 1986. And the regulatory process has been slow since 2010, but IP of GM is protected under the Indian Patent Act, and our seeds are protected under a separate act called PPV and FR, which is Protection of Plant Varieties Act. BT cotton is the only GM crop released so far. There's a lot of activism against GM crops in the country, so this has actually been going a bit slow. And so a lot of work has gone into it. A lot of trades have been developed in the country by both private and public, but they are all right now at different stages in the regulatory work, or they have been withdrawn from the regulatory work. So cotton, rice, mustard, vegetables are important crops on which work has happened. Biotech trade licensing in India happens because we have millions of farmers. Unlike in the US, where you have only a few thousands of farmers in each crop, when you have millions of farmers and many companies, seed companies, the licensing happens to the seed companies. The seed companies then take it down to the farmers, and then they pay royalty. The seed company pays the royalty to the company which is giving the trade. They are the same structure, whether the company is an Indian company or a multinational or a public breeding program, whatever it is, this is the structure which is operating today. Whether it is for GM or even non-GM, it is the same structure which operates. History-wise, 2002 BT cotton was approved, 2010 BT eggplant was put on moratorium, 2022 GM mustard is approved but is right now in Supreme Court. It has not yet come into the market. There is a very robust regulatory process. I don't want to go into all the detail. There are many agencies involved in this and a well laid out process for deregulation of GM and even gene editing. SDN3 will go through the same process. So it's a very robust process that happens. What is awaiting approval in India? HT cotton is from Bayer Myco. As we said that weed losses in cotton is very high, more than 20%. So there is an effort to provide an alternative through herbicide-resistant cotton. Then there is BT or nitrogen use efficiency and phosphorus use efficiency in rice. And there is BT and HT in corn. All the three are there at different stages of regulatory work. Pest resistant and climate resilient crops are in the pipeline. As you can see on the left side, insect tolerant rice, cotton, corn, soybean, eggplant, there's a whole list. This is tolerant rice, this is resistant potato. Multiple crops have been developed with resistance to both biotic and abiotic stresses. And this pipeline is very strong actually. And some of them are GM, some of them are non-GM, but they have to hit the market. Researchers from ICR rice research have developed genome-edited rice lines with higher yield. And most popular variety in India, Samba Masuri, has been edited to have higher grain number. Drought-resistant and genome-edited rice variety likely to be released to farmers in 2026, which was an announcement made by the Agriculture Minister. So I think there is a lot that is happening in this space, but they have to hit the market still. GM tries to conserve natural resources, whether it is fertilizer use efficiency, which will reduce the use of chemical fertilizers by 30%, or water use efficiency, which will help the crops to grow with less water. They are also under development. But, as I said earlier, it is very unlikely that GM technology will be approved in a food crop like, especially a staple food like rice in India. But this development is going on. There is a long list of technologies under development by different people in different crops. I just made a list to show it to you that a lot of work is going on. And a lot of scientists are working on this. They have spent their lifetimes on working through this application of different technologies. On the right side, you can see marker-assisted selection, or it is other ways of gene editing or GM or various technologies which are being used in each of the crops is listed in the right column. So there's a lot of work that's going on. So ag biotech, if you see, to conclude ag biotech piece, there is an innovation and entrepreneurship coming up here that is actually working on biological inputs for biocontrol agents, biostimulants, biofertilizers, food preservation technology, because we have actually almost 30% of our food is lost post-harvest, and 30% of our production is lost post-harvest. So there is a lot of emphasis on using technology for food preservation so that we don't lose so much of the food that is produced. And artificial insemination technology for livestock, genomic services, etc. A list of companies which are working. Flow of investment into ag biotech has been a bit on the lower side in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship. This is where we talk of the startup system, which is working. Only $147 million has come in 25 deals since 2018, which is actually out of almost $4 billion, which came into the startup system during the same period. Only 147 million has gone into biotech. That means it is not been a preferred destination for investors. And I will show you where they invested. Developing sustainable bio-alternatives to chemical agri-inputs, computational bioinformatics solutions for seed trait hybridization. All these are under focus right now. solutions are mostly product based, but a few green shoots are working on providing genomic services and decision support services. Those who use breeding and gene editing and other um, uh, genomic decision making process. So they are working on providing a service which helps you in taking better decisions in all these things. So that's the area which is going on in terms of entrepreneurship. There is a whole section on entrepreneurship. I don't want to go into that, but just I want to tell you that there is a lot going on in terms of addressing different areas. There are three major areas: that pre-production, production, and post-production handling of agriculture, where startups are coming up, both science-based as well as technology-based, digital technology-based startups. And you can see that they're addressing different things, different aspects of this. And this is necessary to bridge some of the gaps and the needs that the farmers are facing. It could be satellite based, it could be sensor based, it could be just electronic platforms based delivery of services and products, advisory services on the farm for the farmer to improve his economic practices and link him to the markets and provide him financial services. Various things are under there here. I don't want to go into details because it's a very big subject again. There are multiple investors who are investing in this space. These are the names of some of the investors. So it is but at the end of the day, like I said, out of $4 billion, you can see here, out of $4 billion, $3 billion has gone into downstream agtech, which is actually where the farmers are being connected to markets. This is where the investors see value. This is where a lot of startups are coming using digital technology and electronic platforms to connect farmers to the markets. Because the farmer also wants the same thing, that if he adopts a particular technology or a tool, he wants to adopt such tools which will give him a better price discovery opportunities. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the farmer is interested only in achieving a better price for his produce, because that's where he is suffering most of the time. So now my last 3 slides are on policy imperatives. Based on all this story, what is it that we would like to see on the policy front, right? And this is where actually I thought it could be interesting for some of you who work in this particular area. So a national strategy. In India, agriculture is a state subject. We have a federal structure where each state has a lot of powers given by the constitution, and agriculture is a state subject. It's not a central subject. So each state takes its own decisions on agriculture, but still we need a national strategy and a national approach towards agriculture. We must decide what is the crop portfolio we want to promote, what are the technologies we want to use, how do we make sure that different states work together to improve farmers' incomes. So various subjects are there which are related to not just a state, but across states. So that's where actually there is a need for center to evolve a national agenda and strategy involving all states, political parties, and other stakeholders, including farmers. So there has been a discussion that we must have a National Agricultural Council where all these people sit together and then take important decisions on policy and also its implementation. This has been on the agenda, even of the government. So there is still, work going on there. Second is repurposing subsidies. Subsidy is a double-edged sword, as we all know. That subsidy is like a crutch, and you can't keep the farmers on crutches for too long. Farmers have to become, farmers are doing business, right? We should not consider him to be doing anything else other than business. For him, he's producing to sell to somebody who needs it. So he must make money in that process. So it is not subsidy, but it is actually enablement of the markets to perform properly is something which will actually help the farmer more than subsidies. So that's where actually some of the subsidies have actually had negative effect. For example, I mentioned about fertilizer subsidy. Part of it has to be diverted. Power subsidy, which is there in many states, it's a highly political subject, has actually led to misuse of water. So power subsidy has to be fully repurposed, and major part of fertilizer subsidy has to be repurposed towards promoting economic practices that conserve natural resources or rewarding villages and communities who follow sustainable agricultural practices. Third is MSP and procurement. I talked about the minimum support price that the government provides as a market support mechanism in 23 crops. The government actually buys only 3-4 crops, and it is not a very efficient system. Finally, we have to find ways that markets operate well and efficiently so that the farmer is able to sell in the markets. Research is a big area, and there has been a lot of talk on research, enhancing research investments in agriculture. Currently, we invest only 0.6% of our agricultural GDP on research, whether it is seed or chemicals or biologicals or whatever, and that is not enough. So there is a recent report which has been published by ICR that this must go up to at least 1% in the short run and eventually to 2%. So that will mean a huge increase in research investment. But when you increase research investment, you have to make sure that the research is well directed towards the right causes. In other words, it will be wasted investment. So there is a lot of need to actually do this, and we have been advocating that there must be a recognition for research companies, whether it is in seeds or crop protection or whatever, who are investing money. There should be a national register of research companies, and there should be a prioritization of areas which is agreed between different stakeholders on where the research investments must go. And so all that whole mapping has to be done in terms of research. Connecting farmers to markets, I already talked about it, that this is important to modify crop portfolio. That means if you are able to produce what the market demands, then automatically the crop portfolio will get shifted. But also important thing is modernization and digitization of entire output management system with easier access to storage, markets, and financial services. This is something on which we are working. And a legal structure for enhancing contract cultivation. We do believe that contract cultivation will actually improve farmers' price discovery. And we also need stable policies on import and export of agricultural commodities from the country. This often is subjected to very knee-jerk reactions depending on the prices, because the consumer always dominates in these policies, and consumer inflation is always kept as a main consideration. Global competitiveness of Indian farmer has to go up, means you have to allow Indian farmer to be equipped with the best, latest cutting edge technologies for him to actually produce most efficiently and be competitive. If he is not competitive, he will lose not only export markets, but also domestic market, because it is an open market and globalized market. Mechanization needs a boost. So the custom service centers that I talked about, Uberization, needs a lot of money, investment from the banks, and that's an area which is to be seen, and it may also, some of the subsidies may be directed towards this particular area. Value chain development, we already talked about it. There is a need to identify clusters, and with complete data traceability. Nowadays, all exports are being subjected to traceability and sustainable production certification before you can export anything out of the country. So that whole system has to be set up. Digital and physical infrastructure, public infrastructure is being built, and the farm gate infrastructure, connectivity, roads, and other infrastructure to be created, upgraded to global standards. Digital public infrastructure is an area which needs a lot of attention. This was talked about by our government. The finance minister talked about it in the recent budget speech also, and there is money being allocated for this purpose. But it has to be in collaboration with private sector. It cannot be completely done by the government, and that's the model which has to be found by the government to actually make this happen. Financial services, very important. Still, a lot of farmers are dependent on private money lenders, and our total credit flow into the system is only about 60% of the total credit requirement. So there is still a lot of money which the farmer takes from private money lenders. We have to bring easy access to credit through digital platforms, and also insurance coverage for the farmer to reduce his risks is also very important. Innovation to be promoted. I talked about innovations. So $1 billion fund is to be put together. Government has already provided a fund, but it is not big enough. So this also has to actually invest in the right places. But very important is public education on new technologies. One of the areas that we find problematic is that government and private industry are investing in developing modern technologies for agriculture, but the public doesn't know anything about them. And there is easy way of confusing the public with regard to the safety and other points about the technologies. It is not just about GM. I'm talking that it can be on anything. So whether it is GM or gene editing or even hybrids, there is a lot of discussion that is being generated by those who are opposed to this area. So there is a need for scientific information to be transmitted to the public. Finally, end-to-end coverage of policies for priority crops. Like I said, cotton, edible oils, pulses. Some of these crops, fruits and vegetables, maize, forages, for these crops, you need end-to-end policies. A policy must address the entire value chain, not just a farmer's viewpoint or a consumer's viewpoint. We have to bring all of them together into one room, have a discussion, and then make a comprehensive policy structure which will meet end-to-end requirements of this particular industry. So these are some of the policy imperatives about which we have been talking to the government. Hopefully, some of them will see the light of the day in the very near future. So that's about all that I wanted to share today. Thank you very much, and I can take some questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Ram. That was a great talk and really comprehensive overview. But also those policy prescriptions, I think they're exactly the type of prescriptions that we need to see changes happening in Indian agriculture. I'm going to open up for questions. There's some online also, then. But let's. Sorry. Are there any in-person? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Any in-person questions? Chandra.
Thank you for this wonderful and comprehensive presentation. I really wonder, what really the private industry can really do much more, really if the government is willing, or even without it, what really higher role and better role, can play, the industry can play in the coming decade. You say 2030 or something like that.
Yeah. So as I said, the first thing that we have to do is to increase research investments. I think the private industry has to come forward to increase research investments. This report, which I talked about, showed that only 15% of the research investments have come from private industry. 85% have come from public institutions. So private industry has to increase research investments, not only in seeds, but also in crop protection and various other things. But for that to happen, private industry has to have the enabling policies, which will actually help them to do. But also, like I said, some of the crops, which are important for local communities, private industry has to do. I think looking beyond profits and looking towards their duty as a general, private industry also has to spend 2% of their profits on what is called as CSR, which is the expenditure towards general good, public good. So that some of that money can go towards creating some of these infrastructures and things like that. So there has to be a bigger dialogue on that. But yes, I agree that private sector has to do much more. We do spend, for example, today close to $80 million every year in seed and biotech towards research, but that's not enough. It is only 3% of our revenue. It has to go to 8 to 10% of revenue as per global standards. So there's a lot that private sector can do.
And
thank you, Ram, for such a wonderful talk and also for the excellent work you're doing in this space. My question relates to one of the policy imperatives you mentioned is about repurposing subsidies. And this to me is one of the areas where it's always easier said than done, given the vested interest, the political interest in maintaining things the way they are. it feels to me like one of those spaces where we could have excellent ideas, but the reality is that it's very hard to change anything that already is in place. Can you maybe speak a little bit more about the politics of subsidies in the context of India and how you would see that actually shaping up the process of moving from one regime to another?
So
I knew that would come up.
sorry.
I knew that would.
I
come up.
know, yeah. So I think this is the toughest challenge and this is the toughest question to answer also, because as you said rightly, it is politically very sensitive subject. Most of the subsidies are driven by political considerations. But I do see that while power subsidy is a very, and we talked of only fertilizer subsidy and power subsidy, only two major subsidy items today in the Indian agricultural context. Power subsidy will take much more political will to reduce because it affects the farmers very directly. Fertilizer subsidy, I do believe that can be progressively reduced. And this has actually ballooned because of increase in prices and the exchange rates. Actually, in terms of absolute dollar value, it might not have gone up so much. But in terms of Indian rupees, it has gone up quite a lot. It used to be hardly $20 billion. Now it has gone to, the subsidy element used to be not even $20 billion. It used to be just about $15 billion. It has now gone to $25 billion. So I think government can take those decisions. For example, urea is overused because it is highly subsidized in the country. So if you just set right the priority subsidies among fertilizers themselves, you will reduce some of the unnecessary consumption of urea, which actually leads to more pests and diseases many times. So I think government can do this. There is a thinking going on in within the government on this. I am very sure that they will do, but they will do in very incremental steps. They will not do anything dramatic and drastic overnight because that will be suicidal for the government. But it will happen, I'm very sure.
And anything
Yeah.
online? Let me see if there's any online.
Sure. I know one of the questions online was about BT cotton. And if you could speak about what the concerns about BT cotton are or were, and in your opinion, how valid are they?
The concerns expressed by those who are opposed to BT cotton, for example, let's say. So they had 2-3 major concerns. One is that did it lead to an increase in other insects? For example, BT cotton is meant only for bollworms, right, which are lepidoptera and pests. But as you know, in a biological system, when you control one pest, some other pest comes up because of natural competition. So that has happened, definitely. Sucking pests have gone up in the last 10-15 years. So that needed more of pesticide application. So that is one area. Second is that on resistance management, whether when the resistance comes, whether we are able, because the approval when it was given, it needed the farmers to plant non-BT plants around the BT cotton field. 25% of the non-BT, 25% of the area had to be covered with non-BT around the BT plants for a resistance management system. But that could not be done by the farmers. No farmer would lose 25% of his area in terms of crop destruction with pests. But that could not be done. So that is also another argument that you can't implement regulatory recommendations and stewardship protocols. So how can you? Third point is that we don't know what are the long-term health effects of this. When they say long-term, they mean 50 years, 100 years, things like that. So I think the regulatory studies do have tests and data generated about the long-term health issues to both human beings, animals, and also environment, long-term health. So there are ways. So, I mean, even in pesticides regulations, you do long-term health studies because it's a part of regulation. So those studies are done. But always they say that the studies which have been prescribed are not adequate. So that is another area which is also quoted by the 2010 moratorium on BT eggplant. That was one of the reasons quoted by the minister himself that time. But I think those are some of the things. But on herbicide tolerant crops, there is a lot of opposition saying that these are not good for labor because it will displace labor. But as I said, labor itself is not available. Availability of labor is a myth in the Indian conditions. So the data doesn't support that, but it is a perception issue which is being created. So those are a few things, but otherwise it's a very big subject. I can talk the next 2 hours on that. But
Let's see, there's a person here.
Yes. See, these days,
yeah, it's okay. You can speak. Yeah.
and these days there is more of stress on sustainable production. And many of the sustainability standards prohibits non-GM, I mean, the GM crops, and also use less of chemical fertilizers. Now, now, how does it, the balancing? Is there any kind of a technological research going on in that area? Number one, and number two, I have another question. Is that when the lot of research is going on in biotechnological side to overcome these problems, the one thing that is very essential is the extension services.
Yeah.
That is how to make this experiment reach the small farmer. So that delivery is one of the biggest challenges.
I agree with you. Extension is a big issue. I think technology or any good product, any good practice getting scaled up very rapidly does happen if it is a good one which is delivering value to the farmer. Like it happened with BT cotton. 95% of the area got covered with BT cotton in a record time. In no other country a technology was picked up at such a high speed because people saw value in that. Same thing happens with some practices. Same thing happens with some products which come into the market, not necessarily high-tech products, but even a normally developed variety or hybrid, if it is performing very well, it will just shoot up just like that. So the farmer's absorption capacity and farmers' readiness to adopt new products and new practices is very high in India. They always want something which is delivering the value. If it is not delivering value for decades, they won't pick it up. But if it is delivering value, within a few years, they will just. So extension in that sense, in that context, has a role to play in terms of stewardship. Because if it is a good practice, for example, DSR today, DSR is badly needed by the country. It is needed by the farmers themselves. But DSR adoption is not like, if it is so good, it should have picked up already by now. But it has certain inherent obstructions in terms of mechanization, in terms of weed control. You need weed control in DSR. And how do you control weeds? So if we provide a comprehensive solution, it will pick up. But that solution has to be properly educated. Farmer has to be educated about the solution. Sometimes this education, I agree, that is a lacuna, and the public extension system needs to be strengthened along by the private extension system quite a lot. Both have to work together. There are, you know this very well, you are from India. So there are 700 what are called KVKs. There are Krishi Vigyan Kendras, which are rural extension units set up by ICR. And they do work as centers of knowledge dissemination to the farmer. But they are not enough in number. They have to be 10 times more, maybe 20 times more in number to cover such a large country. So we need some investments to be done in that space. But I am very hopeful that with the digital technology, the extension is actually getting transformed quite a lot. Because now the knowledge is getting delivered to the farmer on his mobile. And the physical visit by an extension officer is not as necessary as it was, let's say, 15 years back. I think digital will transform extension quite a lot, much more in future. And hopefully that should actually help the farm. But your first question, sustainability needs less chemicals, and Indian government is also promoting natural farming. They are promoting organic farming in a big way. So in front of the farmer, all the options are there. He can do natural farming, he can do organic cultivation, he can do chemical cultivation, he can use GM, which is the right way. Farmer should have a choice. What we always say is that don't restrict any choice that the farmer can exercise. Let him have his freedom to choose what he wants to do. And that is the way, that is the best way. There is a toolkit available to the farmer. Let him decide what is good for him. Why should we decide what is good for him? I think that is where actually some of these things, for example, there is a reason why when GM is reducing application of pesticides, why it should not be a part of a sustainable package. There's really no reason. But I think these are some of the things which are set globally as some of the conditions for accepting. So
let's see, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
There are two people who want. Let me get both questions together, and then you can.
Okay.
Thanks for a great talk. It seems like public-private partnerships are going to be really important to achieve a lot of those policy objectives you listed. But in recent years, there's definitely been public pushback and even like activism against private entities getting more involved in agricultural markets in India. Do you have like a strategy on how to like increase public perception of private actors in agricultural spaces?
Also, Ramya. Wait,
Speak into the mic.
so there are people on mic.
Thanks for the great talk. I was really struck by the global competitiveness, and I'm wondering what the role of subsidies for global competitiveness, given that a lot of US and a lot of other countries have huge subsidies.
Yes. That's a complicated question. This is a much easier question. So, so that is an area on which Indian government is always having huge discussions with the WTO and others on what subsidy levels are there in India compared to what is there in US and other areas. So that's why I'm not suggesting reducing subsidies. I'm only saying repurposing subsidies in a way that actually helps the environment and helps our future path forward. So I don't think in any way I'm reducing the total outlay of money. Okay, I'm only saying that use it for the right purposes. So, so that can be a very big discussion and about which we can do. But your point that how can we improve perception about private role in inputs like seeds, for example. And it's very easy for the public to think that a seed is a public good, right? Why should there be private investment in seed? Because it is a public good and it should be freely available to the farmer, which is there with OP crops. So it is freely available to the farmer. He can save the seed, and this is precisely the reason why while hybrid seed he has to buy every year, he decides to buy because he is getting value out of it. It doesn't mean that he is becoming dependent on a company or a private enterprise for his seed supplies. I think it is a mutual dependence that the company also needs its customer. Companies will never kill their customers. No, a good businessman will never kill the customer. So they would try to, through competition, they will improve the services and the products over a period of time. This is how the market operates. You take mustard case in India. Mustard is 100% OP crop 20 years back. Today, 70% or 60% of it is converted to hybrids. Most rapid hybridization has happened in mustard in the last 10 years. During the same period, hybridization of rice has not even crossed 7-8%. Why? It's the same farmer. He's not picking up rice hybrids, but he's picking up mustard hybrids, knowing fully well that both are coming from private enterprises. So I don't think the farmer is worried whether the seed is coming from an Indian company, a multinational, or a public research unit, he is not bothered about all that. Farmer wants result on the field. And so to that extent, he will take those risks. And farmer will never take 100% risk. He will first test it in a small way. And if he is happy, then only he will use it. Yes, there is an element of risk in the sense that the companies may exploit such demand by increasing prices disproportionately. So this is where exactly the role of the government comes in enhancing competition in the market. Government policies must enhance competition in the market. And for that, they must encourage investments, research investments. They must provide a supportive regulatory and public policy to bring more competition in the market, because it's only competition which can reduce or keep prices under control. Artificially controlling prices, for example, BT cotton prices in India are controlled by the government since 2016. What it has done is that it has just reduced research investments in cotton, because the private enterprises don't have any more profits left in the business. So they have just cut research investments. When companies don't make money, they cut two things. Because I ran companies for 40 years, I know it. They will first cut research investment, then they will cut training investment. Two important things which will give long-term benefits, so they will cut first. Because otherwise their bottom line for the current year is under threat. So that's what has happened. So as a result, today our cotton hybrids don't have the same genetic quality which was required, which was there even 20 years back. So to fight a pest or to fight something, you need research investment. I think that's where actually the farmer understands. But whether the general public understands or not is a big question mark. I think that's where some of the activism actually exploits that lack of understanding among general public about what is OP, what is hybrid. And a leading politician once traveling with me, he's a parliamentarian, traveling with me in the flight, asked me, is it true that GM seeds farmer has to buy every year, while non-GM he can save? Now, you can imagine that somebody at that level who is actually passing laws doesn't know the difference between OP and hybrid and thinks that GM seeds have to be bought every year while non-GM farmer can save. So I had to explain to him that GM or gene editing, these are all things which are tools which can be used either in hybrids or in OPs. And it is only OP, whether it is GM or not, the farmer can save. It is hybrid, whether it is GM or not, farmer cannot save. So this difference people don't understand. Many common people don't understand this. So I agree that there's a lot of need for public education, communication, even by the industry and by the government and the regulators. Even a regulator, why can't the regulator stand up and say that whatever passes through my regulation, I pass something, I approve something, I stand by its safety and things like that. Right? It is his duty to say that he's running a robust system, because there are people attacking the system just to show that the regulator is doing a bad job. Scientists must stand up and talk for technologies in which they have spent their lifetime. And similarly, industry should talk. Why not? Industry is investing millions of dollars in developing technologies. Why can't the industry stand up and talk? But when industry talks, it is seen as a self-interest. It is not seen as. So I think there are very finer nuances to this, but good question.
I think with that, we should bring this session to an end. And let's all thank Ram for a great talk and a great question and answer session.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity, Professor Pingali. And then it is an honor for me to come and speak to all of you here today. Thank you very much.